My name is Kyle McDowell. I'm an author, I'm an inspirational speaker, and I am trying to change the world.
Okay.
How about that?
That's brilliant. Do you know what? I was at an event, which is sort of tech VC, European tech VC event. There's about 75 people there. And one of the debate topics was, what is the difference between the US and Europe in terms of technology businesses and success? And so people are sort of saying, is it access to capital? And do you know what? In the end, we settled on attitude, right? Because you say, I'm here to change the world, and you keep a straight face. And I think Americans get to do that, and Brits cringe, and Dutch people don't even say it, right? So there's a thing about, an amazing thing about being in America, where you say, I'm going to be the best in the world at a thing, or I'm going to change the world. And people go, yeehaw. And we're like, we're behind you. Whereas over here, people say, really? Really? You? Nah. You're on drugs. And so I do think that that, as you said it, it's like you are on a mission and you are changing the world. And because you believe it, you get a head start.
Yeah. I mean, should we set out to say I'm going to change nothing? Or, I just believe in, like, you never reach a finish line or a destination if you haven't established where that finish line or that destination lies. And for different people, that place lies in different places, right? That destination is different. For me, I always have set my targets high and work like hell to achieve them. If I don't, I'll rally, come up with something different. But I'm not going to start with a goal of something less than I'm capable of.
But yeah, it's aspirational. And it's not in a particular niche, in a particular geography. It's like world. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
What's broken?
Well, that's where I spent most of my time. When I say change the world, it's largely initially focused on the corporate world, the business world. We spend, each of us on average, at least in America, we spend about 100,000 hours of our life working, which is an incredible, it's a big ass number. As a matter of fact, it's second only to sleep, that of things that we'll do on this planet. So I believe if you want to have an impact, that's a great place to start, because we spend so much of our waking time there. And that is essentially the mission that I'm on, is to rid the corporate world of its toxic ways, the dysfunction that so many of us have just grown to accept, and create environments that allow people to thrive, not just loathe. And I think I know it's possible. I was that guy. I loathed, I disliked a lot of my corporate identity, if you will, the first 20-ish years. And when I made this shift to a more principle-based leadership style, as well as a principle-based lifestyle, the rewards that I've found have been exponentially greater than what I experienced in the first 20 years.
And what were you doing for 20 years? What were people paying you to do?
I led massive organizations. So I worked for 3 Fortune 10 firms. For some context, in my last 2 roles, I led more than 30,000 employees. I had P&Ls that were multi-billion-dollar P&Ls for which I was responsible. Primarily in the healthcare space is where I spent a lot of time. And, for a fun fact is, in one of those roles, I led what I think at the time, and perhaps still is, the world's largest mail order pharmacy, filling 53 million prescriptions a year. So I don't think that's funny. I think that's an incredibly powerful role to sit in. It's important. We get people medication, keep them well. It is something that I took a lot of pride in. But that was one of the 5 or 6 functions that I led for one of the world's largest pharmaceutical firms.
But you were doing it in a way that was suboptimal for you and the business?
Yeah. So the first 20 years was really focused on, it was candidly focused on me. How could I get the next raise? I was always angling for a bigger bonus. I wanted the big fancy title. I wanted my jokes to be the funniest in the room, which tends to come with elevated titles in the corporate world, right? And by most accounts, I had a really successful run, man. I made good money. As I mentioned, led thousands and thousands of employees and checked a lot of those ego-related boxes. But at the end of, when I look back at that time period, it's true. It played the way I approached my work played a major role in my divorce.
Mm-hmm.
It played a major role in some health issues that I encountered, and I just genuinely wasn't a very happy person. So I took this role back in, I think it was around 2007, that I had an opportunity to lead in a way that I had always wanted to lead, in a way that I had never been led. And I'd taken on what was mostly described as a dysfunctional team, really high performing, but a fair amount of territorial behavior, some sandbox, and it just wasn't a real sense of team. So when I took on this role, I thought, well, this is your chance, dude. You have a chance to lead differently. You've got to. My boss had been pretty upfront in saying that he was going to be hands off and let me lead essentially autonomously. And that's when I created these principles. They're called the 10 we's. They're just 10 sentences that begin with the word we, and they govern first how we treat each other behind the scenes. I think it's incredibly important. If you expect excellence externally, you need to strive for excellence behind the curtains. The team that delivers that excellence, they must be high functioning, taking care of one another, and really have a genuine interest in the plight of those around them. We can't just flip a switch and deliver excellence externally, but yet we're, a mess behind the scenes. So that was my approach with this team. And over the course of the subsequent number of months and ultimately years, the business results improved dramatically, hitting marks that had never been achieved by almost every measurable of this same program, which had been in existence for 20-ish years. But more importantly, the transition and transformation that I saw in the leaders of that organization, they were bosses for so many years and then found a way to actually be leaders and care about one another and care about those they lead. It's not a coincidence that that is the major driver behind improved results.
What was your sort of Damascene moment, your epiphany? Why? What was the thing? Where did you stumble across this new way of thinking or lead? What was the what was the genesis of this idea?
I remember it like it was yesterday, Dominic. It was I was in a hotel room in Lawrence, Kansas. The night before, I was going to meet with the top 40 or 50 leaders of this newly inherited organization. And I was thinking through, and I was kind of on stage the next morning. I knew I had to kind of deliver some words. And it was the first time I had met many of those team members. I'd only been on board maybe 60 days. And with my laptop in my lap, I thought, all right, let me create a few slides here and just kind of communicate, my expectations. I wanted to use that as an opportunity to share my expectations of the team, but also I wanted them to be really clear on what they could expect from me. And as I was kind of ruminating on the approach, it occurred to me that my direct reports, the 6 or 7 people that reported directly to me, they had an average tenure of about a dozen years in their current role. So for me to come in, and something struck me as so obvious that evening, for me to come in to that conversation and share what I was here to do and how I was going to make this team better and how I had seen a fair amount of success in similar size organizations before this role, I think it would have been received as hollow. Like they had forgotten more about their roles than I had actually learned in the first 60 or so days, right? So it occurred to me that and anything having to do with me was going to be off-putting, and it needed to be much more we focused. And I started very fundamentally. The first we is a really no shit, Kyle. This is an obvious thing that we're all going to subscribe to. It's we number one. It's we do the right thing always. And from there, they just kind of expanded one upon another until I had 10. And it's been kind of my code of conduct and how I lead ever since.
Are all 10 the same as you wrote that night in Kansas, or have you swapped?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I did change the order of them.
Right.
But that not a single word from any of those principles has changed.
And I like that it's strange because people will say, oh, let's try and, I don't know, let's run a sales and marketing campaign, or let's try and do something to persuade people that we're something that we're not. But I think I'm paraphrasing you back, but the level of service that you deliver to externally can never be better than the level of service that you deliver internally to each other. I think that is what you're saying. And mainly because I suppose I've looked at it from, looking at what drives, say, net promoter score or something like that, some measure of that sort of external focus. And what was this business where you took this high functioning or high performing but dysfunctional team? Did you know what their dysfunctions were when you were writing these 10 things? Or is actually the secret of these 10 things is that they are applicable without knowing what's broken?
I think the answer to both of those questions, they're not mutually exclusive. So I was aware that there was a bit of not, I think dysfunction might even be too strong of a word, but what there was a real palpable sense of, if my business function is performing well, but my peers is not, I'm winning. And what was, I think what was really obvious was a lack of a sense of an overarching team dynamic, right? It was a bunch of little teams inside of what should be one big team. And then the second part of your question is absolutely valid. Regardless of where an organization or a team, I don't care if it's the bowling team, the chess team, it doesn't matter. If they're a group of people aligned around a common goal, and that goal could mean different things for different people, but we do have a finish line. We know what we're trying to achieve, and that is excellence. These 10 principles are applicable to anyone. And that is where I've found the most surprising byproduct, and I hear it from, gosh, countless readers at this point, is the impact that these principles have had on their life, not just the corporate life, not just their business, but how it has established a framework for their behavior. I had a guy tell me once it's changed how he's raising his children, which is incredibly humbling to hear.
As you speak, I have in my head a whole array of clients, former clients, and I described the behavior as 7-year-olds playing soccer. Because Johnny comes off and he goes, Mum, I scored 2 goals. Aren't I amazing? And it's like the team lost 5-2, right? And I think it's because to get to the C-suite, you have to be an expert in the thing you're an expert in, and you keep getting promoted because you're the best guy. Asking for a promotion, asking for a bonus. You get promoted, and when you get to the C-suite, actually, for that C-suite to be high performing and to be better than your competitors, for this company to be better than your competitors, that C-suite needs to be no company accidentally outperformed its leadership team. And so I think
not sustainable
no,
anyway.
Indeed. So, but what they've never had to do is collaborate. And then all of a sudden they've got this job, which is now I'm on the C-suite, and now the company performance is around, we need to collaborate. But they've never been promoted because they collaborate. They've probably never had feedback about their collaboration. And they've always seen their team as the people beneath them, not their peers, And it's amazing that it comes as a surprise to people that they're going to have to collaborate. Lots of them have no idea how to do it. And I meet organizations and, I get people to describe the behavior in the organization that they would like to eliminate. And they talk about gossip and backstabbing and, not having difficult conversations. And it's as if these people are talking about other people other than them. And it's like these behaviors wouldn't exist there's 8 people in the room. These behaviors would not exist if you all behaved the way you're saying everybody else should behave. And so so that's why I was drawn to the book, because I just thought, I spend time creating, working with clients to create like team charters. And actually, now I just need to give them a book and say, we could just do this. I mean, they have to want to do it, obviously, but it's like the 10 commandments for working in a team.
Let me unpack a few things you said, because I think there's a lot of wisdom in there. This notion or phenomenon that happens in the C-suite where a lack of collaborative DNA, let's just call it, or muscle memory for collaboration, that lack, I think, starts way earlier in our career. And I've seen it too many times to count where, and I'm guilty of it as well, we promote people into positions of management, not because they're good leaders, but because they have shown that they are good at the X's and O's of the function in which they sit, right? It happens every day, right? You haven't shown a lick of leadership ability, but because you can process a widget faster than other people on your team or at a higher degree of quality than other people, when that management position opens, you're a natural fit in most eyes. But, and I do think I think most organizations do a wonderful job training employees on how to do their job. But what they fail to do is train and educate and inform and inspire those in positions of leadership, because a manager and a leader are two different things, right? You know that. So when someone is promoted, we don't do a very good job of arming them with the tools that they need to be effective as a leader in this new role. We just assume that they can pick these things up. And I think that crime follows someone all the way to the C-suite.
I can't remember the source now, but somebody gave me the stat the other day. We were talking about recruitment, and 70% of managers in the UK have had no management training. And these will be in organizations where they say, people are our best asset. You talk to business owners, I talk to business owners all the time, and they say, attracting and retaining the best people is our biggest challenge. And you're like, okay, but you're not, it's a bit amateur hour. You're not really trying very hard.
Dominic, you said something else I thought was really insightful, and I'm going to botch the numbers, but I read a study recently that said something like 80% of leaders in this survey, they're people leaders, responded that they didn't necessarily agree that they have a culture or an opportunity for a cultural reset or transformation. 50% of their employees responded similarly. So the disconnect between what the leader feels and how they think things are going and how those that they lead or manage, their perception, are wildly different. And I think that's growing every single year, by the way. I mean, in 2020, Gallup shared that at its highest rate ever, I think 40 something percent of respondents of a huge survey. It's that State of the Global Workforce report. They do it every single year, right? In 2020, the response to "my company cares a lot about my overall well-being," 40 something percent strongly agreed, the highest ever. In the years prior to that survey, it was in the 20th percentile. In the years since then, it's fallen back into the 20th percentile every subsequent year. And the reason is the pandemic, right? In 2020, leaders had to show they cared about overall well-being by getting people home, by keeping them safe. And the truth is, we all did that because we wanted to keep the lights on.
Yep.
We had to keep business running. And the workforce wisened up. So when we talk about the gap between what the leader feels, or the manager feels rather, and what his or her team feels growing, I think that is a sentinel measurement from that survey. By the way, the most recent iteration of that report was just released last week, I believe, maybe the week before. So that disconnect is bigger, I think, bigger than ever, and growing every single year. And then the last thing that you got my attention with was, just handing a book to someone. And I know you were being a bit tongue in cheek, but you hand a book to someone and say, go do this. I'm the first to admit the principles, the 10 W's, the book, essentially, how I make my living now is incredibly simple. It is incredibly simple, but simple's not easy. It's just not, for any number of reasons. Losing this fascination with our own growth, accolades, develop, and transitioning to a more we-oriented paradigm is really hard. It's easy for a day. It's easy for a week. It might even be easy for a month. But invariably, we're greeted with opportunities that bring the me back out of us and make us and kind of push us to make decisions that are more me focused rather than the benefit of the team. And I just think and I've been there, and I understand why it happens, but I think there's an opportunity that a lot of people are missing in the form of genuine connections with those they lead that, oh, by the way, will result in much better business results. But it's not easy to get there.
If I think back to the best team that I was on, it's the executive team at Pier 1, and we decided as an executive team that there was a growing culture of sort of gossip within the organization. And so we decided that we could adopt a principle of no triangulation, which is that we as the executive team would not have a negative conversation about anybody else on the team unless that person was in the room. So it was so we will not badmouth anybody on the team. Like if we've got and we said we'd support each other. So if Kyle, you come to me and you're talking about Bob, I say, look, this sounds like a conversation you've got to have with Bob, right? do you need help with that? Can I facilitate something? But, if you say no, I'm going to give you 72 hours. I'm going to check in with Bob to make sure that you've met your commitment to the team and that you've had the conversation with Bob. And some people, I think that was the single thing that we did that transformed the team the most. And some people couldn't live with that. They said yes on the day,
Right.
but ultimately they went off to work elsewhere because they'd spent too long with their elbows out in a sort of dog eat dog world, and it was like intellectually they could agree, but just found it behavior's hard to change.
What a wonderful example of simple, right? What leadership team would sit in a room and honestly say, no, we're not going to, I still want to have conversations behind people's back. I don't subscribe to this. No one's going to do that.
Nobody's going to say it out loud. I think some people are thinking it. But as long as you've got them, as long as the majority of the people are not being disingenuous, then you really have a chance. Like if everybody's saying it, and if everybody's saying but thinking the opposite, then we're on a hiding at nothing, because they're just nothing.
We're in real trouble. We're in real trouble.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But that's my point, man. It's easy to say, and it's simple to say, we're going to do this, or we're going to lead this way, or we're going to treat our people this way. But execution is a different thing.
And when we do the work with clients, I say, look, you don't tell people you're going to do this, because if you slip up,
right,
they're waiting for you to slip up. So it's like, keep this a secret to this team.
So true.
And let's see if we can make it work before we tell anybody. Or actually, they might notice the behavioral change, and then we can fess up to it rather than another initiative.
And I love that you take that approach. And that's similar to what I did when I created these principles, but also when I work with companies now. I was almost silent about them after that first day, because I didn't want them to be words on a wall. I didn't want them to be just hollow business jargon that no one could identify. I didn't want it to be a top-down initiative, because this stuff is not an initiative.
Yeah.
It has to be ingrained in who we are, how we operate. It can't be a light switch. So, and I knew, man, I tell you, I remember it vividly. I knew when there was a moment that I realized these principles had gained a life of their own, when I saw the team start creating the 10 We Awards.
Yeah.
And I would visit any number of our locations, and I would start to see signage that I didn't even know was being commissioned. I certainly didn't request it. So, me being quiet, I think, played a large role in the proliferation of the principles and allowing people to identify with them on their own terms, on their own time, on their own kind of wavelength. But had I pushed it, I just don't know that it would have. And by the way, those principles, they're still the cultural manifesto of that organization some 7 years later.
I can imagine those people in the organization somewhere in the grassroots, and it's like they've been given the permission to do something that they feel, in their hearts is like how they want to work and how they want to work with each other. I did some work with a toxic leadership team a while ago, and the more vulnerable most of the team got, the less happy the bullies were, to the point where 6 months later the bullies were no longer there, because actually the vulnerability became the superpower of the people who'd been the previous oppressed.
Oh my God.
And so
story.
I'm just thinking about that. People start to create signage because they're sort of rallying around. And it's like, this is, yes, because because this whole sort of negativity is more powerful than positivity, sort of 4 or 5. So the people who whinge, the people who complain, it's really hard to rally everybody else against them, because there's no common cause. There's no sort of common flag to rally behind. And so you roll this out, and there's a common, here's a thing we can rally behind. Like, we can get everybody behind it and drown out the naysayers.
Lucky for guys like you and I, it works in both directions, because we've all seen that toxic employee, the proverbial bad apple that tends to bring those around them down. Just an energy vampire, right? And they can leave a tremendous wake. But the opposite is also true. You find energy around a different approach. And for me, it was the 10 We's. Giving the team something to latch onto other than this negativity that this jerk over in the corner has been spewing for months or years that we've all kind of become accustomed to. It gives, and that's why I tell people a lot today is you will create a magnetism and you will pull people along, even sometimes those that appear to be the most cynical. And I've dealt with a lot of that as well. Like there's this cynicism around leading this way that people think it's just some happy, it's garbage. It's not. It actually works, but I can't. It's like anything else in life. I can tell you over and over and over again, but you have to actually do the work yourself to make it work.
So let's dig into what are these 10 we's then? You don't have to share them all. You could share your favorite handful or whatever makes the most sense.
I'll fly through them because I do think, I know that they build from one another, and without context, a couple of them wouldn't make sense.
Okay.
So I'll give you the very, very drive-by version here. So the first I've already mentioned, it's the fundamental we, and it is, if this is not the fundamental we, then everything else is a house of cards, and the first bit of pressure we feel, we're going to collapse. And we do the right thing always. And for us to prove that we're focused on doing the right thing, let's jump to we number 2, which is we lead by example. Listen, it's such a cliche, and everyone, the question is not, am I leading by example? You are. You are leading by example. The question is, are you leading by an example you would be proud to see replicated? One that you want to see paid forward for, maybe generations to come. When we lead by example, I think it is the mark of every single high-performing team, and that's our ability to follow up and follow through. So we number 3 is we say what we're going to do, and then we do it. Pretty simple, right? Not easy, but simple.
Yeah.
And for us to actually begin to execute on we number 3, we've got to do what? We've got to take action. So we number 4 is we take action. Every organization, every leadership team is well aware of a closet in the corner of the building where all the ugly, gnarly problems sit that nobody wants to address because it's just tough. In our teams, in a culture of excellence, which is what I try to create with teams, we recognize that those problems exist. We may not take action on every single one of them, but we're not going to be quiet about them. We're going to take action in identifying them and then be judicious on how we approach getting after them. But if you want teams and members of your team to take action, to recognize when things are gnarly and they have a chance to be better, we've got to be ready to stumble. And we number 5 is we own our mistakes. I want my teams to say, hey, Kyle, that's broken. I have an idea on how to address that, but it might not work. It might work. But they won't do that if they feel as if they make a mistake, it's going to be met with some type of retribution or punishment or even being dismissed. So we've got to be in a position where the team is comfortable to raise their hand and say, hey, I blew it. I made a mistake. And we won't have that without we number 6, which is we pick each other up. So when someone identifies that they're struggling, even if it's a situation outside of work where maybe they're dealing with an elderly parent or any financial situation, anything that is going to stunt their ability to be excellent in the workplace. We've got to be prepared to deal with those. And we're going to pick you up. We're not going to turn a cheek. We're going to recognize that you're struggling and we're going to help you. Now, the leader has a second obligation, which I won't go too deep into, but that is to propel members of the team to new heights. It's not enough to just to pick somebody up. Where do they want to go? What do they want to do? How do they want to be perceived? What's the next step on their journey? All leaders should play a keen interest in those answering those questions. After we pick each other up, it becomes a little less, it becomes tougher at this point with we number 7. And that is we measure ourselves by outcomes, not activity. It is, corporate America is just ripe with pride around busyness. I was double booked 7 times yesterday. I was triple booked twice. I had 13 meetings. Whatever the calendar suggests, we've grown to kind of associate our value and connect our value with how busy and packed our calendar is. But our clients don't pay for that. Customers don't care how busy you are. They pay for the outcomes. So quite simply, I say, every one of us in any type of position, regardless of the level at which you sit inside of an organization, there are at least 2 or 3, but probably more metrics, outcomes, things that you are assigned. You have been assigned those there on your performance appraisal, or you talk about them every month with your boss, whatever those are. If you find yourself engaged in activity that doesn't support delivering those outcomes, it should be questioned. It should be scrutinized. Why am I in this meeting? It doesn't contribute to me delivering on these outcomes. I don't need to be here. But not many of us are comfortable saying that because we feel it minimizes our value to the organization, which is a real shame. But we've got to start looking at outcomes over activity. We number 8 is my favorite of all the principles, but by far the toughest. And it's we challenge each other. Challenges have historically in most organizations, they're reserved for those in a position of authority where the boss can issue the challenge. The boss on top of that boss may issue the challenge, but never, at least in my experience, where we really overt in saying members of the team are not allowed, they're obligated to challenge the boss. Peers on a team should challenge one another. Look, we're all on a team. We should comment or complement each other's skills and abilities and the things that we're not great at as well. So you can't do that without saying, hey, you're not pulling your weight. Can I help you? What can I do for you? I think those conversations are awkward and tough to have, but they ultimately lead to better outcomes. But we can't have that we number 8 without we number 9. It's we embrace challenge. Whether the challenge comes from someone internally, whether it comes from a market force, competitive threats, new entrants, pricing whatever the scenario is, we're not going to be the team that wilts under pressure. We're going to be the team that's galvanized by these challenges. We're going to be better for those challenges. We recognize that almost everything in life, worth having anyway, is the result of overcoming one or more challenges. And I want our teams to be no different. That's got to be our approach. We're not going to run from them. The very last of the 10 we's is purposely number 10, because if it were any earlier, I think it's a recipe for disappointment. And that's we obsess over details. We're going to be really focused on the details because in most industries, I think in most domains, what separates good from great and those, kind of average experiences to a really wow experience, something that I can lean back on, is the details. So we're going to be really tight on those details, whether it's something that we do for each other behind the curtains, and certainly for those that we do externally, is a real overt emphasis on our connection to those details. That's the 10 we's, man.
That's brilliant. I interviewed Hurst Schultz, the founder of Ritz-Carlton, one of the founders of Ritz-Carlton hotels. And I was chatting to him and he was telling me about how they do daily huddles in a Ritz-Carlton hotel. And I said, you are the COO. How do you know? And he said, because when we opened a new hotel, that's what I did. I went to that location and I hired the 350 people who would open that hotel myself, because that's the detail that I needed to own for that hotel to open, to have the right level of experience. And, then he'd built that 16 service mantra. One is, take, don't point, for example, right? Because instead of saying, where's the gym? You say, what's over there, right? He said, no, you have to take the guest to the gym.
Walk them.
And while you're doing that, that you have $2,000 that you can do to fix any problem that you find. Well, you wouldn't talk to a guest to find a problem to fix unless you walk them there. And just the whole, ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen, right? It's not hierarchical, it's peers. And it's excellence and detail. It's the, I had a CEO the other day who was saying, why is it fucking me? Why is it me? And I said, because you're the founder. And so it's in your DNA. But you need to hire people who see that detail as their responsibility too. It's really hard.
That's right.
It's really, you can build a culture and you can get people to, but if there's a culture evolves over time, that ignoring the details is just how we do it around here. It's hard. That's why it's 10.
That's exactly right.
You put it in a number 2 or 3 and it's
man.
just too hard, because that detail thing is that's where it's at.
That's exactly right. And it's about establishing our brand, right? It's about our brand, not just the brand of the organization, but the brand of the team and even the brand of members of the team. Am I known as someone that is really committed to delivering a good work product, even if it's behind the scenes and no one externally sees it? Like those are characteristics and traits that are important to find in someone when you're recruiting. It's important to kind of nourish those characteristics and traits when you see it in somebody, because they are hard to find. And even those that have it as part of their fundamental kind of being, they still need to be encouraged and pushed, because it's not easy to do every single day.
So I've spent a lot of my life hiring salespeople. And people often say, what are your top tips for hiring salespeople? And I go, have they polished their shoes? Right? Like if you're coming to an interview and you haven't polished it, today you're selling yourself. Tomorrow you're selling my stuff.
That's right.
For me. But today it's you for you. Could you be bothered to polish your shoes? Right? And I just, I just find
I
it
love that.
fascinating and then they turn up without a notepad and pen because I might not say anything interesting. And it's
Ooh,
just like, right? It's like I can't like this is how you're wired, right? So I can work with you if you've
yep,
got some fundamentals, but it's just fascinating the way
yeah,
it's that I just think some of those things are like it's pride. Do you take pride?
that's right.
You get up in the morning and take pride in what you do. You're a professional. You are curious about how to get better at this thing that you do. Yeah, I think it's fab.
I'll add to that, man. I've found that, especially in kind of mid-level managers, and uh, even early stage of their career managers, if you can get people to change their paradigm around, I gotta go do this. I have to go to this meeting. I have to conduct this one-on-one. I have to, if you can, and it sounds really, again, simple, but not easy, change that to I get to. I get to meet with, so I get to host this one-on-one today. I get to lead this meeting. I get to, and if you frame it that way with the intention of actually having an impact, and I think we should all consider our leadership legacy. That might sound cliche, and as I say a lot in the book, unicorns and rainbows. But when you start to transition from an I have to an I get to, all under the umbrella of what my leadership legacy will be, your mission changes. It's no longer about achieving the results that the organization has established for us. It's about helping another human being become better than they were yesterday. It's about helping them on their journey. It's about making yourself someone that they look back at some point and say, man, I'm better off for having worked with Kyle. And I think I don't care if you're flipping burgers, if you're a barista, or you're leading a Fortune 10 firm. If you can transition that paradigm to more of an I get to, and you think about the impact on others, not the business results, they'll come. The business results will come if you're having an impact on those
Well,
around you.
I think if people use that language, then the people who want to be managers or leaders in the organization are people who value that work rather than I got promoted, I got a pay rise, I need to do this to get the next promotion and the pay rise. They keep the sole contributors doing what they do well because they love it, and the only reason to become a manager is because you're good at managing, or you'll only be any good at it if you get real joy from it. Nobody's ever got amazing at something
I
that they
love that.
really never liked doing.
I love that. I love that. And I think that should be a filter for everyone, any person making a hiring decision for those that are going to be responsible for other people. I love that.
I've got some quick questions for you. What's your
Hit me.
what's your genius?
I don't know if this would qualify as a genius. I'm incredibly empathetic.
Okay.
I recognize that the toughest thing that's ever happened to me is the toughest thing that's ever happened to me. And what's the toughest thing that's happened to you is wildly different, regardless on what scale we even consider. So I think I'm good at putting myself in other people's shoes to understand from where they're coming.
Okay.
I don't know if I consider that a genius, but I do believe it's a superpower of mine.
Very good. What drives you every day?
People, people. I've experienced some not so fun environments, soul sucking even, and I've experienced those that I didn't even feel like I was going to work. And this is the time that I mentioned where I created the principles. I felt like I was part of a team that needed me as much as I needed them, and we had a job to get done. And that is simply a result of the connection of the people that I was able to forge then and still today.
And what unpopular opinion do you hold?
I don't know if it's unpopular as much as it is something that I've lately been kind of on a soapbox about. Is it's okay to disagree. We can disagree and not hate each other. We can disagree without me thinking, that I need to try to change your opinion or that you're an idiot because we have a different perspective on the same topic. It's most topics, especially in the US, have become so polarizing, right? And we feel as if just because we're on opposite ends of the spectrum of any one issue, then I can't even be your friend. And I think there's a lot more that connects us as as humans, regardless of of our background, from where we come, and who we are. There's a lot more that we have in common than that which divides us. But we're allowing those things that divide us to be as almost as if it's the majority of components that we have in common or not. Like, if we disagree, that's okay. We can still move on and have a healthy relationship with one another.
What is the most recent thing you've learned or the recent skill you've acquired?
So I go in and out of meditation practice. I've spent the better part of the last probably 6 years trying to be more disciplined with my meditation. And I do feel it's a timely question, because I feel late, as if maybe the last few months I've found a rhythm, and I'm seeing it pay off in ways that I didn't see pay off before. And that's my ability to kind of be a little more self-reflective and patient with things that aren't going the way that I want them to go, at least as quickly as I want them to go.
Okay. What's the biggest myth in business?
Oh, that you have to know everything. You have to be an expert. You have to have all the answers. I mean, that is such a myth that I would reframe as ego. And it's certainly how I led for so many years. Like, I had to be the smartest guy in the room. I had to have all the answers. Like, you couldn't challenge my expertise. But that's foolhardy, because the quicker you mentioned earlier, vulnerability. The quicker you can lose or set aside most of that ego, embrace vulnerability, you show a relatability to those around you that you didn't show before. I truly believe it's an equation I live by, or certainly lead by. Relatability plus authenticity equals trust. So if my team and those around me see that I am not the guy that has to have all the answers. I'm a real idiot on many topics. I'm happy to share that and tell you those that I don't know a lot about. I think that is me being relatable, because they too don't know everything, and it's me being authentic. And trust naturally follows when you can find those two behaviors.
Fab. Kyle, people should buy Begin With We, your fantastic book. But what else, what other resources do you think, or other books that you found helpful along the way?
I'm a big Brene Brown fan. I think she's written a couple of really powerful books. At least they were powerful to me. But I will throw another curveball that I'm only just now realizing. I read this book twice now, and I'm only realizing within the last year or so the impact that it's having on me outside of in all aspects of my life, not just my personal life. And that's The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. I just spent a minute talking about ego. The book is almost entirely about the lack of a need for ego, and how when we can drop the ego, we're so much more, we're able to see things so much more clearly. And I would add to that, The Power of Now has had a huge impact on me, almost as much as Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Another, everyone knows about Marcus Aurelius and meditation. I think everyone at this point knows about it, but that book has had a tremendous impact on me as well.
And are you a Stoic then? Is that where you've landed?
I shy away from labels, man. Perhaps I don't know. I don't know. I know that I am trying to be less ego driven. I'm trying to be more reflective, and I'm trying to leave the world a better place than I found it. And if that makes me a Stoic, then I'm good with that label, I guess.
Well, Kyle, thank you very much indeed for giving us your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you.
Likewise, Dominic, thank you for having me. You're doing really important work, man, and I appreciate the platform to share my message. Thank you.